The night my family erased me, it happened in less than 10 words. You're not listed. Just sit with the staff. That was what my aunt said, not even looking up from her seating chart, while 200 people in tailored coats walked past me into the ballroom of the Hawthorne Conservatory in Palo Alto. I stood there, holding a wrapped gift I'd paid for myself, listening to a string quartet tune their instruments, and realized I had just been excluded from my own family's most important night. If you've ever been quietly pushed out of a room that was supposed to include you, you already know how this story ends. And if you're listening to this and thinking of someone who did that to you, stay with me. Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment about where you're listening from, because this isn't just a family drama. It's a confession about what happens when you stop accepting the role they assign you. My name is Maren Caldwell. I was 31 years old when my family decided I was no longer useful. This was supposed to be my younger sister's engagement gala, a public announcement, a celebration, the kind of night people photograph from every angle and remember forever. It was being hosted by my parents at the Hawthorne Conservatory, a glass and stone venue they rented for $45,000. Not including catering. I knew the number because I'd reviewed the invoice 6 months earlier, when my father asked me to check for clerical errors. I wasn't just a guest. I was the one who had helped plan half of this event. But when I arrived, my name was gone. My sister, Eliza Caldwell, was 28 and glowing in a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than my car. She was engaged to Nathaniel Brooks, a private equity associate with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. They were standing near the stage, surrounded by donors, venture partners, and my parents' friends from the country club. Eliza didn't see me at first. Or maybe she did, and chose not to. My mother, Patricia Caldwell, had chosen this moment to become busy. She was adjusting floral arrangements that were already perfect, laughing too loudly, touching people's arms when she spoke. My father, Richard Caldwell, stood near the bar with a drink he wasn't supposed to have, nodding at men who spoke over him. I was invisible. That wasn't new. I had learned how to be quiet early. I was the older daughter, the reliable one, the one who got straight A's, took care of paperwork, fixed mistakes. Eliza was the spark, the promise, the one they said would go far. I grew up learning that love was conditional, and approval was earned through usefulness. By the time I was 31, I had a master's degree in forensic accounting, 8 years of experience in corporate compliance, and a senior analyst role at a healthcare firm in San Jose. I managed internal audits worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I caught fraud for a living. I knew how to read what wasn't being said, and what wasn't being said that night was louder than the music. I found a waiter and asked quietly where I should sit. He glanced at his tablet, then at me, then lowered his voice. "You're not on the guest list, ma'am. But they said family could stand near the back. Or the service hallway." The service hallway. That was when something inside me went still. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't confront anyone. I thanked him and stepped aside, standing near a row of folding chairs where the catering staff kept extra trays. From there, I could see everything. That's when I noticed the will folder. It was sitting on a small table near the stage, embossed leather, my father's handwriting on the tab. Estate update. I recognized it immediately. I'd helped him organize those documents years ago, after my grandmother, Evelyn Moore Caldwell, died. My grandmother had been the only person in my family who ever looked at me and saw me. She'd built the original Caldwell family business, a regional property management firm with holdings across Northern California. She trusted numbers. She trusted discipline. And before she passed, she told me something she'd never said out loud to anyone else. "Maren," she said, gripping my hand in the hospital, "don't let them erase you. They'll try." At the time, I thought she meant emotionally. I didn't realize she meant legally. As the speeches began, Nathaniel Brooks took the microphone. He thanked my parents for their generosity. He thanked Eliza for her grace. He thanked my grandmother for the legacy that made all this possible. People applauded. I noticed something else then. The lawyer, Mark Henson, my parents' estate attorney. He was standing off to the side, watching the room instead of the stage. He looked uncomfortable. His eyes kept flicking toward the will folder, then toward me. That was my first mini warning. The moment my professional instincts woke up. Then, Eliza took the microphone. She smiled, voice soft, practiced. "This night is about family," she said. "About moving forward. About new chapters." She didn't look at me once. At that exact moment, my mother leaned over to Mark Henson and whispered something. He stiffened. I watched him shake his head slightly. That was when I knew. This wasn't just about seating. This was about exclusion. And whatever was inside that leather folder, it had been changed. I didn't leave the venue. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't demand answers. I stood there, listening, watching, letting the truth assemble itself piece by piece. Because when people think you've been sidelined, they stop hiding things. And my family had just made the mistake of assuming I was done. They had no idea this was the moment I stopped being quiet. I didn't confront anyone that night. That's the part people always get wrong when they hear this story later. They assume there was a scene, raised voices, tears, security stepping in. There wasn't. I stayed exactly where I was, near the service hallway, holding my glass of water like it was an anchor. I watched. That has always been my advantage. When you grow up as the overlooked one, you learn to read rooms the way other people read menus. The speeches ended. Applause rolled through the conservatory like controlled thunder. The string quartet shifted into something celebratory and expensive. Guests began to circulate, congratulating Eliza Caldwell and Nathaniel Brooks, kissing cheeks, exchanging business cards disguised as well wishes. No one came toward me. Not my parents, not my sister, not a single cousin. I could have slipped out and no one would have noticed for at least 40 minutes. That realization settled in my chest, heavy but clarifying. I wasn't forgotten. I was excluded. That distinction matters. I stepped away from the noise and walked down the service corridor, heels clicking softly against concrete floors no one ever photographs. The hallway smelled like lemon cleaner and heat lamps. Staff moved past me with trays and purpose. They belonged here more than I did. I found an empty alcove near the loading door and pulled out my phone. No missed calls, no messages. I checked the calendar. My parents' annual trust review with Mark Henson had been moved up 3 weeks ago. At the time, my father had said it was just scheduling. I hadn't been invited. That hadn't seemed unusual. I wasn't named executor. Eliza was, or so I thought. I scrolled further back. A voicemail from my mother 2 months ago. Patricia Caldwell's voice, tight and careful. "Marin, honey, we're making some adjustments for the future. Nothing you need to worry about. Focus on your work. You've always been so independent." Independent. That word again. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the memory of my grandmother's voice surface. "Don't let them erase you." At the time, I'd smiled and told her not to worry. I opened my eyes and looked down at my hands. They were steady. That's when I heard my name. Marin. I turned. Mark Henson stood a few feet away, jacket off, tie loosened. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd boarded the wrong plane, and it was already in the air. "You shouldn't be back here," he said quietly. "I was told to stand with staff," I replied. My voice sounded neutral, almost bored. He winced. "That wasn't my call." "No," I said. "It wasn't." He glanced down the hallway, then back at me. "I didn't expect you to be here tonight." "I was invited," I said. "Originally." "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about," Mark said. I waited. Silence makes people nervous. Nervous people tell the truth. "There were changes made to the estate documents," he continued. "Late changes." "By whom?" I asked. He hesitated. That was answer enough. "My parents," I said. "And my sister." "Yes." I nodded once. And I was removed. "You weren't removed entirely," Mark said. "Too quickly. It's just, the structure shifted." Shifted. That was lawyer language for something ugly. "How?" I asked. He rubbed his face with one hand. "Your grandmother's controlling interest in Caldwell Property Group was reassigned. The voting shares went to Eliza." "And the non-voting shares?" I asked. He looked at me sharply. "You know the difference." "I work in compliance," I said. "Try me." Another silence. "You received a cash equivalent," he said. "One-time distribution." "How much?" I asked. He named the number. It was insulting. It was less than 1% of the company's annual revenue. Less than the value of a single commercial property my grandmother had personally negotiated. Less than the invoice for tonight's flowers. I let the number sit between us. And the rest? I asked. The trust now prioritizes lineage continuity, Mark said. Your parents argued that Eliza's engagement and future children. Stop, I said calmly. He stopped. This wasn't my grandmother's language, I said. This wasn't her intent. No, he admitted. It wasn't. Then why did you allow it? I asked. His shoulders sagged. Because I was instructed to. And because contesting it would have required someone with standing. I met his eyes. And I don't, I said. He didn't answer. That was my answer. Footsteps echoed at the far end of the corridor. Voices. Laughter. Eliza's laugh. Light and rehearsed. Mark straightened. I shouldn't have told you this, he said. No, I replied. You shouldn't have helped them do it. He flinched. I didn't sign off on everything, he said quickly. There are inconsistencies. I tilted my head slightly. Such as? He exhaled. Your grandmother added a contingency clause. It was vague. At the time, we assumed it was symbolic. But now it's inconvenient, I finished. Yes, he said. I smiled then, just a little. Send me a copy of everything, I said. The original will, the amendments, the trust restructuring, all of it. I can't, he said. Attorney-client privilege. I stepped closer. You just breached that privilege in a service hallway. He swallowed. And if there were irregularities, I continued, and if the primary beneficiary was excluded without disclosure, and if undue influence could be demonstrated. He raised a hand. You're not listed as a beneficiary anymore. I nodded. But I am listed as a witness. That landed. His eyes widened slightly. You remembered that. My grandmother made me sign, I said. She said I should understand what I was agreeing to. Mark stared at me for a long moment, then looked away. I'll see what I can do, he said quietly. Do that, I replied. And Mark? Yes? Don't warn them. He nodded once and walked away. I stayed there another minute, letting the noise from the ballroom wash over me like distant weather. Then I went back inside, not to the service hallway, to the bar. My mother saw me first. Her smile froze for half a second before she recovered. There you are, Patricia Caldwell said, as if I'd just returned from the restroom. I was wondering where you'd gone. I was standing where I was told to, I said. Her eyes flicked to the back of the room. We'll talk later. We already did, I said. Just not out loud. Her jaw tightened. Eliza approached then, arm looped through Nathaniel Brooks's. She looked radiant. She also looked nervous. Marin, she said, you should have stayed near the family table. There wasn't a place for me, I replied. Nathaniel smiled. Weddings are chaotic, he said smoothly. Things get mixed up. This isn't a wedding, I said. It's a transaction. The smile slipped. Eliza's fingers tightened on his arm. Can we not do this tonight? She asked. I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm just paying attention. She didn't respond. That was when I realized something important. They thought the damage was already done. They thought I was too late. They were wrong. Because exclusion only works if the person you push out walks away quietly. And I wasn't going anywhere. The morning after the gala, I woke up before my alarm. That alone told me something had shifted. I lay in my apartment in Mountain View, staring at the ceiling fan as it cut slow circles through the dark. No panic. No anger, just a quiet, unfamiliar focus. The kind I usually felt right before an internal audit uncovered something ugly. When you work in forensic accounting long enough, you learn that betrayal rarely announces itself. It hides in footnotes, in timing, in who suddenly stops returning emails. At 6:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Mark Henson. One message. No greeting. I sent what I could. Check your inbox. Delete after downloading. I sat up. By 6:14, my laptop was open. By 6:16, the files were downloading. There were more than I expected. Original trust documents from 2009, amendments from 2016, a codicil added 6 months before my grandmother, Evelyn Moore Caldwell, died, and a final restructuring dated 3 weeks ago. I didn't rush. That's another mistake people make. They think revenge is about speed. It isn't. It's about accuracy. I made coffee. Black. No sugar. Sat at my desk. Opened the first document. My grandmother's will was exactly as I remembered. Clear, direct, unsentimental, equal treatment of granddaughters. Majority control protected until both had demonstrated independent financial competence. Language about stewardship, responsibility. No mention of marriage, lineage, or grandchildren. Then came the codicil. That was where the knife slipped in. It wasn't blatant. It never is. The wording was surgical. A redefinition of readiness. A shift from measurable criteria to discretionary judgment by trustees. Trustees, plural. I scrolled. My father, Richard Caldwell. My mother, Patricia Caldwell. And my sister, Eliza Caldwell. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. They hadn't just excluded me. They'd boxed me out procedurally. The final restructuring document sealed it. Voting rights consolidated. Management authority transferred. My one-time payout justified as equitable compensation. Equitable. I smiled, thin and humorless. That word had sent more people to court than almost any other. At 7:03 a.m., my phone rang. My mother. I let it ring. At 7:11, a text. We need to talk. Today. This can't wait. At 7:19, another. Your father is very upset. I finished my coffee, closed the files, and replied with one sentence. I'm available at noon. My office. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Fine. By 9:30, I was at work. Same badge swipe, same polite nods, same glass-walled conference rooms. No one there knew my family had just attempted to write me out of my own bloodline. That anonymity felt like armor. At 10:15, I pulled a file from my personal archive, one I hadn't touched in years. Evelyn Moore Caldwell. Estate advisory notes. My grandmother hadn't trusted sentiment. She trusted contingencies. There it was. A memo attached to the codicil, unsigned but unmistakably hers. The language wasn't legal. It was instructional. If discretion is abused, remove it. I read that line 3 times. Then I laughed. Quietly, once. At 11:42, I received another email from Mark Henson. I shouldn't be sending this, but your grandmother insisted it be preserved. Attached was a scanned letter, handwritten, dated 2 weeks before her death. Marin, if you are reading this, then something has gone wrong. I didn't blink. I didn't rush. I read every word like a forensic analyst reads a confession. She wrote about pressure, about conversations she'd overheard, about Patricia pushing for Eliza's future, about Richard's fear of instability, about Nathaniel Brooks, though she didn't name him, only referred to the man who speaks too smoothly. She wrote one final sentence that made my chest tighten. I trust you because you see patterns others ignore. At 11:59, my parents arrived. Richard Caldwell looked smaller in my office than he did at the conservatory. No stage lighting, no audience. Just a man in a wrinkled blazer and tired eyes. Patricia sat beside him, spine straight, jaw set. Eliza wasn't there. That was intentional. Marin, my mother said. We didn't mean for you to find out like this. Find out? I asked calmly. Or be told. Richard cleared his throat. We did what we thought was best. For whom? I asked. For the family, Patricia said quickly. I nodded once. You mean Eliza. Her eyes flashed. She's building a future. So am I replied. You don't need the company, Richard said. You have a good job. You're stable. There it was again. Independent. Stable. Disposable. You took my grandmother's intent, I said, and rewrote it without telling me. Patricia leaned forward. We compensated you. You silenced me, I corrected. Eliza chose that moment to walk in. She looked different in daylight. Less polished, more brittle. I didn't want it to be like this, she said. But you didn't stop it, I replied. Her silence was answer enough. You always landed on your feet, she said finally. I needed this. No, I said. You wanted it. Her face hardened. You think you deserve it more than I do? I met her gaze. I think Grandma trusted me not to abuse it. Richard stood. This conversation is over. No, I said. This one is just starting. I slid a single page across the desk. The handwritten letter. Patricia's hand trembled as she read. Richard went pale. Eliza swallowed. You have no standing, Patricia said weakly. I smiled, slow and controlled. You're wrong, I said. I'm not contesting the will. They stared at me. I'm contesting the trustees. That was when the room went quiet, because they finally understood. This wasn't about inheritance. It was about control. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for permission. No one spoke for a full 10 seconds after I said it. I let the silence do the work. My mother, Patricia Caldwell, recovered first. She always did. Her spine straightened, her expression cooled, and she folded her hands in her lap. Like a woman settling in for a negotiation, she believed she could still win. You don't understand how this works, she said carefully. Trustees aren't removed because someone feels slighted. Good, I replied, because I don't feel slighted. My father, Richard Caldwell, stared at the letter on my desk as if it might start moving on its own. Evelyn was sick, he said. She was confused near the end. She was lucid enough to warn me, I said, and lucid enough to document pressure. Eliza Caldwell shifted her weight. She didn't sit. She hovered near the door like she might bolt if the room caught fire. This is going too far, she said. You're turning this into a legal fight. I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. You turned it into a legal fight when you signed documents that cut me out, I said. I'm just responding. Patricia's mouth tightened. You're threatening your own family. No, I said calmly. I'm protecting myself from them. That landed harder than anything else I'd said. Richard sank back into his chair. He looked older than he had the night before. Smaller. What do you want? He asked. There it was. The question they always asked when they realized I wasn't backing down. I want the trusteeship reviewed, I said. Independently. By the court. Eliza laughed sharply. On what grounds? Undue influence, I replied. Failure of fiduciary duty. Self-dealing. Patricia stood. This is ridiculous. You don't have proof. I tapped the letter. I have intent. I have timing. I have a last-minute restructuring that benefits one trustee exclusively. And I have professional expertise in identifying manipulation in financial governance. Her eyes narrowed. You drag our name through court? You already did, I said. I'd just be reading it out loud. The meeting ended badly. There's no softer way to put it. My parents left first. Patricia didn't hug me. Richard didn't look at me. Eliza lingered, eyes searching my face for something I didn't give her. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. We can work something out. I picked up my coffee mug. You already did, I said, without me. She left without another word. That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to a probate litigation attorney in San Mateo named Julia Renwick. She was in her 40s, sharp, and known for taking cases everyone else thought were too delicate. I'm not contesting a will, I told her. I'm contesting trusteeship abuse. She paused. Those cases don't settle quietly. I'm not looking for quiet, I said. The second call was to my compliance director. I requested a week of personal leave. No explanation. It was approved within minutes. The third call was the hardest. Nathaniel Brooks answered on the second ring. Marin, he said smoothly. I heard things got emotional today. That's one word for it, I replied. You're smart, he continued. Smarter than this. Courts are messy, public. They don't end well. Neither does coercion, I said. A pause. A recalibration. Eliza is under a lot of stress, he said. This kind of conflict could hurt her. That's interesting, I replied. You didn't seem worried about hurting me. His tone cooled. You're misreading the situation. No, I said. I finally see it clearly. He exhaled. What would it take for you to walk away? I smiled, though he couldn't see it. That question, I said, is exactly why I won't. I hung up. By evening, the first retaliation arrived. My access to Caldwell Property Group's internal archives was revoked. That was expected. What surprised me was the email from Mark Henson. They're scrambling. Patricia asked me if your standing could be nullified retroactively. I said no. She didn't like that. Good, I thought. The next morning, Julia Renwick called me into her office. She didn't sugarcoat anything. If we file, she said, your family will close ranks. Your sister will claim independence. Your parents will claim intent. It will get ugly. I grew up ugly, I said. I can handle it. She studied me for a long moment. Why now? She asked. I considered the question. Because silence taught them I would always adapt, I said. I'm done adapting. She nodded once. Then we move fast. We filed 2 days later. Petition for removal of trustees. Temporary injunction requested. Forensic review of restructuring. The filing hit my parents like a controlled explosion. My phone lit up. Calls, messages, voicemails I didn't listen to. Then came the smear. A friend forwarded me a message circulating quietly through extended family. I was unstable, bitter, always jealous of Eliza. Too career-focused to understand family. I read it once, deleted it. Because while they were busy rewriting my character, they weren't fixing their paperwork. And that was their real mistake. 3 days after filing, Julia called me late. "Your grandmother's contingency clause," she said. "It's stronger than we thought." "How strong?" I asked. "It allows for immediate suspension of trustee authority if credible evidence of coercion emerges," she said. "Pending review." I closed my eyes. "And?" I prompted. "And the judge assigned to the preliminary hearing is Daniel Morales," she added. "Former corporate oversight, known for zero tolerance." I smiled into the dark. For the first time since the conservatory, I felt something like calm. They thought exclusion would make me shrink. Instead, it clarified everything. And the hearing was scheduled for 10 days later. The waiting is always worse than the impact. Once the petition was filed and the hearing date set, there was nothing to do but live inside the consequences. 10 days sounds short until you're the subject of a quiet family war. The first sign that my parents were panicking came on day 2. I received a FedEx envelope at my apartment in Mountain View. Signature required. Inside was a cashier's check and a single-page letter on my father's stationery. "Marin, this is more than fair. Take it, and let's stop before things get damaged beyond repair. Dad." The number on the check was 7 figures. It was also strategically calculated. Enough to look generous, not enough to restore control. I didn't tear it up. I scanned it, logged it, and handed it to Julia Renwick the next morning. "Good," she said, sliding it into a folder. "Attempted settlement before injunction. Judges love patterns." By day 3, the pressure shifted. My aunt, Laura Benton, called me. She'd always been my mother's echo, repeating opinions she hadn't formed herself. "Your mother is beside herself," Laura said. "She raised you better than this." "She raised me to be useful," I replied. "That's not the same thing. Think about the holidays," she urged. "Thanksgiving, Christmas. Do you really want court filings hanging over the family table?" "I wasn't given a seat at the last table," I said. "This feels consistent." She hung up on me. By day 4, it went public. Not the lawsuit itself. That came later. But whispers move faster than filings. A colleague asked me, carefully, if everything was okay at home. Someone else mentioned seeing my sister's engagement photos tagged with comments about legacy and next-generation leadership. Eliza Caldwell was already stepping into my grandmother's shadow. I stayed quiet. Day 5 was the hardest. Eliza came to my apartment unannounced. I opened the door and found my sister standing there, without makeup, hair pulled back, eyes rimmed red. She looked younger than I'd seen her in years. More like the girl who used to borrow my sweaters without asking. "I can't sleep," she said. I stepped aside. Let her in. We sat at my small kitchen table. No wine, no pretense. "I didn't know it would turn into this," she said. I folded my hands. "You knew enough," she flinched. "They said you'd be fine, that you didn't need it." "They?" I repeated. She looked down. "Mom, Dad, Nathaniel." That name hung between us. "You let them decide for you," I said. Again, her voice broke. "I'm scared." That was new. "Of what?" I asked. "Of losing everything," she said. "The company, the engagement, the life I was promised." I studied her. "And what about losing me?" She didn't answer. I stood and opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, set it on the table. "This is what Grandma wanted," I said. "Shared control, accountability, not a crown." Eliza didn't touch it. "I can't side against them," she whispered. "I know," I said. She left 10 minutes later. We didn't hug. That night, I dreamed of my grandmother's house. Empty, windows dark, doors unlocked. Day 7 brought the counterattack. My parents filed a motion to dismiss, claiming I lacked standing and was acting in bad faith. They attached affidavits. Eliza's signature was on one of them. I didn't react. Julia called me into her office the next morning. "They're arguing emotional instability," she said, "saying you're retaliating over a perceived slight." "And?" I asked. She slid a document across the table, a deposition transcript from 6 years ago. My grandmother, under oath, during a property dispute. She had said my name. She had said I was the only one she trusted to tell her the truth when she was wrong. That, Julia said, is going to hurt them. Day 9. The night before the hearing. I sat alone in my apartment, lights off, city noise drifting in through the window. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who stayed late to help, who softened her voice, who believed that patience would eventually be rewarded. I thought about the check in Julia's file, the silence in my mother's voice, the way Eliza had looked at the floor. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You don't want to do this. Judges listen to families. Walk away now." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I replied, "I already did. You just didn't notice." I turned my phone off. The hearing was at 9 a.m. And for the first time, I wasn't walking in as the overlooked daughter. I was walking in as evidence. The courthouse in Redwood City smelled like disinfectant and old paper. I arrived 40 minutes early, not because I needed the time, but because I wanted to walk in calm. Control your breathing. Control your posture. Control what you can. Julia Renwick met me outside Department 4, tablet tucked under her arm, expression unreadable in the way good litigators cultivate. "They're all here," she said. "I know," I replied. I could feel them before I saw them. My parents sat together on the left bench. Patricia Caldwell wore a tailored navy jacket, the one she saved for situations where she needed to look wronged but respectable. Richard Caldwell sat rigid beside her, jaw clenched, hands folded like he was praying for this to be over. Eliza sat one row behind them. She didn't look at me. Nathaniel Brooks sat next to her, one arm draped casually along the back of the bench, like this was a networking event instead of a legal reckoning. He gave me a brief nod. Polite, dismissive. I didn't acknowledge it. Mark Henson was there too, seated behind my parents, staring at the floor like he'd already accepted whatever was coming. When Judge Daniel Morales entered, the room stood. He was taller than I expected, hair graying at the temples, expression neutral in a way that felt earned. "This is a petition for removal of trustees," he said, flipping through the file. "Let's begin." My parents' attorney spoke first. He was confident, smooth. He framed the case exactly as I'd expected. A disgruntled sibling, hurt feelings, an attempt to weaponize the court over an internal family disagreement. He emphasized the one-time payout. He emphasized my career. He emphasized stability. "Ms. Caldwell has done very well for herself," he said. "She is not a vulnerable party." I watched my parents as he spoke. Patricia nodded along. Richard avoided my gaze. Julia stood when it was her turn. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She laid out dates, timelines, roles. She explained fiduciary duty like it was a math equation. Then she handed up the letter. Judge Morales read it slowly. That was the first shift. He asked questions about the timing of the codicil, about the sudden restructuring, about why all trustees benefited equally except one. Patricia answered first. Her voice was controlled, almost soothing. "We believed this reflected Evelyn's evolving wishes," she said. Judge Morales looked at her. "Based on what?" "Conversations," she replied. "Family discussions." "Were these discussions documented?" he asked. "No," she admitted. He turned to Richard. "Mr. Caldwell?" Richard cleared his throat. "We were acting in the family's best interest." Judge Morales nodded. "That's a phrase I hear often," he said. "It's rarely sufficient." Then he turned to Eliza. "Miss Caldwell," he said, "you are both trustee and beneficiary. Do you see the conflict?" Eliza hesitated, looked at Nathaniel, then back at the judge. "I trusted my parents," she said. Judge Morales' expression didn't change. That wasn't the question. Silence. Nathaniel leaned forward. "Your Honor, if I may." "No," Judge Morales said. "You may not." That was the second shift. Julia stood again. "Your Honor, we request temporary suspension of trustee authority, pending forensic review." The judge leaned back in his chair. He looked at me for the first time. "Miss Caldwell," he said, "you work in forensic accounting." "Yes," I replied. "Do you believe the restructuring was coercive?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Why?" Because it replaced objective standards with discretionary ones, I replied. Because it occurred shortly before a public engagement designed to consolidate influence. And because the beneficiary who gained control was also positioned to apply pressure through family dynamics. The room was silent. Judge Morales nodded slowly. "I'm granting the temporary suspension," he said. "Trustee authority is paused, pending review. A neutral third party will be appointed." Patricia gasped. Richard stared at the table. Eliza went pale. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "This is not a judgment on final outcome," Judge Morales continued. "But this court does not ignore red flags, especially when the person raising them has professional credibility." He banged the gavel. Just like that, it was done. Outside the courtroom, the explosion finally happened. Patricia rounded on me, voice sharp. "You humiliated us." "No," I said calmly. "I told the truth." Richard looked at me then. Really looked. "You could have handled this privately." "You didn't give me that option," I replied. Eliza stood frozen between us. Nathaniel whispered something in her ear. She shook her head, once. "You did this on purpose," Patricia said. "You wanted to punish us." I met her gaze. I wanted to stop being punished. Nathaniel stepped closer. "This isn't over," he said quietly. I smiled at him. "You're right," I said. "It's just no longer yours to control." Julia touched my arm. "Let's go." As we walked away, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not victory. Relief. Because for the first time, the power imbalance had shifted. And everyone in my family felt it. That afternoon, the emails started. Board members asking questions. Partners requesting clarification. Friends suddenly unsure where to stand. Eliza called me that night. I let it go to voicemail. Because the hardest part wasn't winning the hearing. It was knowing the real consequences were only beginning. Power never disappears. It just changes hands and looks for leverage. The morning after the hearing, the Caldwell Property Group Board requested an emergency session. Not a full meeting, a listening call. That was the phrase they used when no one wanted their name attached to a decision yet. By 9 a.m., my inbox held 7 calendar invites I hadn't been on before. That's how you know you've unsettled the system. I joined the call from my office at work. Glass walls, neutral background, company logo carefully out of frame. I didn't speak at first. I listened. Men I'd known my entire life speaking cautiously, suddenly aware that the narrative they'd accepted without question might have holes in it. When it was my turn, I didn't argue. I clarified. "I'm not trying to take over," I said. "I'm trying to ensure the company isn't being run by conflicted trustees." One of the senior board members, Alan Weiss, cleared his throat. "Your sister is still acting CEO." "For now," I said, "under court supervision." Silence. By noon, the tone had shifted. By 3 p.m., the first resignation came in. Not from the board. From Nathaniel Brooks. He sent Eliza an email. She forwarded it to me an hour later. He cited irreconcilable values and public scrutiny. Translation: he didn't sign up to marry into a lawsuit. Eliza called me after sunset. I answered this time. "He left," she said. "I know," I replied. "You're satisfied now?" she asked, voice tight. I leaned back in my chair. "No," I said. "I'm honest now." She was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't think he would walk," she said. "That's because you believed stability was love," I replied. Her breath caught. "You think you're better than me." "No," I said. "I think I stopped lying to myself sooner." She didn't argue. The next blow landed 2 days later. The court-appointed reviewer requested my presence during the initial forensic walkthrough. My parents were required to attend as well. We sat in the same room we used to hold birthday parties in. The same long table. Different tone. Documents were opened, emails read, timelines constructed. Patricia tried to explain. Richard tried to justify. The reviewer listened, took notes, then asked a simple question. Why was Maren Caldwell excluded from notification? No one answered. That was the moment the case stopped being theoretical. That night, my mother came to my apartment, not unannounced this time. She texted first. "We need to talk." She sat on my couch, hands folded, eyes tired. "I thought I was protecting the family," she said. "You were protecting control," I replied. She flinched. "You always see things so starkly." "Because you trained me to," I said. She looked at me then. really looked. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. "You don't," I said. "You learn from it." She left without asking for forgiveness. I didn't offer it. By the end of the week, Eliza stepped down as acting CEO. The board named an interim executive. Not me. That was fine. I didn't need the title. I needed the truth documented. The forensic report came back 10 days later. It was damning. Patterned pressure. Strategic timing. Trustee benefit concentration. Enough to justify permanent removal. The court scheduled the final hearing, and this time, the room would be full. Because when power realizes it can't hide, it performs. And my family was about to put on their last show. The final hearing didn't feel like a courtroom event. It felt like a reckoning. By the time I arrived at the San Mateo County Courthouse, the hallway outside Department 4 was crowded. Not with reporters, not yet, but with people who suddenly needed to be present. Board members, advisors, distant relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years, but now nodded as if we were old allies. That's how quickly gravity shifts. Julia Renwick met me at the door. "They're nervous," she said quietly. "That's good." Inside, my parents sat apart this time. Patricia Caldwell was alone, posture rigid, expression composed to the point of fragility. Richard Caldwell sat 2 seats away, hands clasped, eyes unfocused. Eliza sat behind them. No Nathaniel, no entourage, no armor. She looked smaller without him. When Judge Daniel Morales entered, the room stood again. This time, no one shuffled. No one whispered. He went straight to the point. "We are here to determine whether trustee authority should be permanently revoked," he said. "I have reviewed the forensic report." That sentence landed like a dropped plate. The reviewer was called first. Calm, precise, no emotion. She outlined the findings as if reading weather data, which somehow made it worse. Patterns of influence, coordinated timing, communication suggesting expectation of benefit, failure to disclose material changes to an interested party. Me. Judge Morales listened without interruption. Then he looked at my parents. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, "do you wish to respond?" Patricia stood. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She went for dignity. "I never intended harm," she said. "Everything I did was for my family." Judge Morales nodded. That phrase again. She swallowed. My older daughter didn't need the business. She was strong, capable. My younger daughter needed protection. There it was. The truth. Finally spoken out loud. I didn't react. I didn't need to. Judge Morales turned to me. "Miss Caldwell, do you wish to address the court?" I stood. I didn't bring notes. "I wasn't excluded because I was weak," I said. "I was excluded because I was inconvenient." Patricia flinched. "My grandmother built safeguards into her estate because she understood power," I continued. "She knew love doesn't cancel self-interest. She trusted structure, not sentiment." I looked at Eliza then. Just once. "This wasn't about favoritism," I said. "It was about control." Judge Morales leaned forward. "When trustees place themselves above the trust," he said, "they violate the very thing they're meant to protect." He paused. "I am ordering permanent removal of Patricia Caldwell, Richard Caldwell, and Eliza Caldwell as trustees." The sound that followed wasn't loud. It was the sound of breath leaving a room all at once. Patricia sat down slowly, as if her legs had forgotten how to work. Richard closed his eyes. Eliza stared straight ahead, face blank. "A neutral fiduciary will assume control immediately," Judge Morales continued. "The trust will be administered per original intent." He looked at me. "Ms. Caldwell, your grandmother was clear. So is this court." The gavel came down. That was the end of their authority. Outside the courtroom, the mask finally shattered. Patricia reached for me, then stopped herself. "You've ruined us," she said. "No," I replied. "I stopped you." Eliza stepped forward, voice shaking. "What happens now?" I considered her. "Now," I said, "you figure out who you are without borrowed power." She nodded once, like someone hearing a sentence they can't appeal. The press found us an hour later. By then, the narrative was already forming. Family drama, betrayal, inheritance dispute. They wanted quotes. I declined. Because the real fallout wasn't public. It was internal. Within 48 hours, Caldwell Property Group announced a restructuring. Richard was asked to retire for health reasons. Patricia resigned from all advisory roles. Eliza took a leave of absence. The family group chat went silent. Then my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. Marin, a man said. Older, controlled. This is Edwin Shaw. I recognized the name immediately. One of the firm's largest outside investors. The kind of man my grandmother had respected. I'd like to talk, he said, about the future. That was when I understood. The hearing wasn't the climax. It was the opening. Because when truth dismantles the old order, it creates a vacuum, and everyone wants to know who will fill it. I hung up the phone and looked out the window. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was being invited. And that was more dangerous than exclusion ever had been. Power doesn't ask politely when it wants something. It calls you by your first name and pretends you've always been on the same side. I met Edwin Shaw 3 days later at a private dining room above a quiet restaurant in Menlo Park. No signage, no valet. The kind of place where conversations don't echo and deals don't leak. He stood when I entered. Late 60s, steel spine, calm eyes. Marin Caldwell, he said. You look exactly like your grandmother did when she was about to make someone uncomfortable. I took the seat across from him. She had good instincts. So do you, he said. Which is why I wanted to speak before everyone else did. He didn't order food. Neither did I. I won't waste your time, Edwin continued. The board is rattled. Investors are watching. They want reassurance that Caldwell Property Group won't fracture. I'm not on the board, I said. No, he agreed. That's what makes you useful. I raised an eyebrow. He smiled slightly. Not controllable, he corrected. Credible. There it was again. The word that had followed me my entire life. Now suddenly valuable. They're discussing a permanent executive restructure, he said. External leadership. Clean optics. And? I asked. And they're ignoring the obvious, he said. The person who already understands the company and isn't compromised. I leaned back. You're asking me to step in. I'm asking if you'd consider it, he said. Interim. Oversight. Limited authority. Authority. Offered this time, not seized. Why me? I asked. Because you didn't ask for it, he replied. And because you didn't burn the house down when you could have. I thought about my parents, about Eliza, about the quiet phone calls that had stopped. I'd need conditions, I said. I assumed you would, he replied. We discussed numbers, scope, duration, reporting lines. Then I asked the question he hadn't. What happens to my family? He didn't hesitate. They adapt or they don't. That's not your responsibility. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from fear, from clarity. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was standing at a crossroads my grandmother had prepared me for. 2 days later, the announcement went out. Interim Director of Governance and Risk Oversight, Marin Caldwell. The press framed it as redemption. The board framed it as stabilization. The family framed it as betrayal. My mother sent one message. You've taken everything. I didn't reply. Eliza sent nothing. The first day I walked into headquarters, conversation stopped, then resumed quieter. I didn't change anything immediately. I observed. Patterns, dependencies. Who deferred to whom? Who avoided eye contact? At 11:47 a.m., a junior analyst knocked on my door. Thank you, she said softly, for saying what no one else could. That was when it hit me. This wasn't just about inheritance. It never was. By week 2, the audit committee asked me to present findings. I did. Calm, measured, unemotional. Irregularities, soft favoritism, informal approvals. The kind of things that don't look like crimes until they collapse companies. Richard Caldwell didn't attend. Patricia resigned her remaining honorary title the next day. By week 3, Eliza requested a meeting. She sat across from me in a glass conference room we used to visit together as children, imagining ourselves powerful. I don't know who I am without them, she said. That's not my job to solve, I replied. I thought if I stayed good, they'd love me, she whispered. I looked at her. They loved what you gave them. She nodded slowly. I'm going to start over, she said. Somewhere else. That's wise, I replied. She stood to leave, then hesitated. Do you hate me? I considered the question. No, I said. But I don't owe you comfort. She accepted that. The next morning, my phone buzzed with the notification. A new voicemail from Patricia Caldwell. I listened, this time. Her voice was flat, controlled. Your father had a minor stroke. I closed my eyes. Doctors say stress, she continued. I suppose you'll say that's not your responsibility either. I called her back. I'll visit, I said. But I won't apologize. She didn't ask me to. At the hospital, Richard looked smaller again. Fragile in a way I'd never seen. I underestimated you, he said. Yes, I replied. He closed his eyes. I thought control was protection, he whispered. That's what people say when they're afraid, I replied. I left an hour later. On my way out, a nurse stopped me. You're the daughter who changed things, she said. I nodded once. By the end of the month, the company stabilized. By the end of the quarter, it grew. By the end of the year, I stepped down. I didn't need the title anymore. I had something better. Choice. And that's when I finally understood what revenge really looks like. Not destruction. Replacement. Power leaves a residue. Even after you step away from it, people still look at you differently. Like you might decide something important at any moment. I noticed it in boardrooms, in elevators, in the way strangers paused when I said my name. I had stepped down from my interim role at Caldwell Property Group at the end of the fiscal year, just as promised. No drama, no farewell speech. A clean exit. That unsettled people more than staying would have. I took 3 weeks off. No emails, no calls. I drove north along Highway 1, stayed in quiet places, ate meals alone. I needed distance from the noise to hear what came next. What came next was my mother. Patricia Caldwell asked to meet me at a cafe in Los Altos, neutral territory. She arrived early, already seated, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. I don't know how to talk to you anymore, she said when I sat down. You don't have to, I replied. She looked at me like that answer hurt more than anger would have. Your father's recovering, she said. He's slower now, quieter. I know, I said. I check the updates, she nodded. Eliza moved to Portland. She says she wants anonymity. That makes sense, I replied. Patricia's mouth tightened. She says you took her life. I didn't respond immediately. Tell her, Patricia continued, that you didn't mean to destroy her. I met my mother's eyes. I meant to survive. That ended the conversation. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Handwritten. From Eliza. She didn't apologize. She didn't accuse. She wrote about working at a nonprofit, about learning how to be unknown, about therapy, about understanding how silence had been her currency. At the end, she wrote one line. I don't know if we'll ever be close again, but I don't think you were wrong. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Some bridges don't burn. They just stop being crossed. The final confrontation came unexpectedly. I was invited to my grandmother, Evelyn Moore Caldwell's memorial dedication. A plaque, a small garden, a quiet event. No speeches. I went. My parents were there, my aunt, a few board members, people who used to pretend not to see me. As we stood near the stone bench with her name engraved, Patricia spoke. She would have been proud, she said, of both of you. I didn't correct her, because pride isn't something you ask for. After the ceremony, a woman approached me, mid-50s, calm, self-assured. My name is Rachel Kim, she said. I sit on the State Ethics Review Committee. I nodded. We've been watching your case, she continued. We're assembling a task force on trustee abuse and inheritance manipulation. We'd like you involved. I considered it. This time, I didn't answer immediately. On my terms, I said. She smiled. Of course. That night, alone in my apartment, I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who believed endurance was virtue. The one who stayed quiet because she thought love was something you earned by disappearing. I thought about the word, revenge. People think it's loud, that it looks like shouting or public ruin. It doesn't. Revenge is choosing not to shrink. It's refusing to be managed by people who benefit from your silence. It's walking into rooms you were never meant to enter and rearranging the furniture without asking permission. My family didn't lose everything. They lost access. And that was the consequence they never planned for. The quiet after a war is always the strangest part. You expect celebration, or grief, or at least noise. What you get instead is space. Empty hours where no one is demanding anything from you, where your phone stays still, where your name isn't being discussed in rooms you're not in. That was my life for a while. I moved apartments. Nothing dramatic. Same city, different neighborhood. I wanted streets my family had never driven down. Coffee shops where no one knew my last name. I kept my job but shifted roles, taking a position that focused on governance advisory work for mid-sized firms. Less visibility, more precision. I was 32 now. For the first time, my age didn't feel like something I had to justify. The task force Rachel Kim mentioned turned out to be real work, real consequences, real people who had been sidelined, manipulated, erased by families that used loyalty as leverage. I listened to their stories without interrupting. I recognized the patterns immediately. Different faces, same playbook. One afternoon, after a long session reviewing case summaries, Rachel leaned back in her chair and said something that stayed with me. People think toxic families are loud, she said. Most of them are polite. That was the sentence. That was the one that explained everything. Around that time, my father asked to see me alone. Not through my mother, not through a message that implied obligation. He left a voicemail himself. "Marin," Richard Caldwell said, voice slower now, rougher. "I'd like to talk. Just you and me, if you're willing." I didn't respond right away. 3 days later, I agreed. We met at a park near his rehabilitation center. He was thinner. His left hand shook slightly when he reached for his coffee. The man who had once filled every room now seemed unsure where to place himself. "I'm not here to argue," he said quickly, "or to ask for anything." I nodded. "Then talk." He stared out at the trees for a long moment. "I thought strength looked like control," he said. "I thought if I decided everything, nothing bad could happen." I waited. "I was wrong," he continued. "All I did was teach you kids to be afraid of disappointing me." That landed, harder than any apology would have. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I just wanted you to know. I see it now." I looked at him. The man, not the role. "I don't need you to see it," I said. "I needed you not to deny it." He nodded. "Fair." We sat in silence after that. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't warm. But it was honest. When I left, I felt lighter. Not because he'd changed, but because I no longer needed him to. A week later, my mother tried again. This time, it wasn't about family. It was about image. "I've been asked to step back from several committees," Patricia Caldwell said over lunch, stirring her salad without eating it. "People are cautious." "Yes," I said. "They associate me with the case," she continued. "With what happened." I took a sip of water. "That's how accountability works." She looked at me sharply. "You could clarify things. You could say you never meant." "No," I interrupted. Calm, direct. "I won't manage the consequences of your choices." Her face tightened. "You're punishing me." "I'm refusing to rescue you," I replied. She didn't finish her lunch. That was the last time we spoke for a while. The final ripple came from an unexpected place. My Aunt Laura Benton sent me an email. Subject line, family. Inside was a long message about misunderstandings, intentions, how everything had gone too far. At the end, she wrote, "We just want things to go back to how they were." I stared at the sentence. Then I deleted the email. Because how they were was the problem. As the months passed, the story faded from public memory. There were newer scandals, louder ones. Mine had never been about spectacle anyway. But privately, things had shifted permanently. Invitations stopped coming with conditions attached. Conversations changed tone. People spoke to me like I might leave if disrespected. They were right. One evening, I sat alone on my balcony, city lights flickering below, and realized something that surprised me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at my parents, not at Eliza, not even at Nathaniel, whose name barely crossed my mind now. Anger requires engagement. I had disengaged. What I felt instead was alignment. My work matched my values. My silence matched my boundaries. My presence was a choice, not an obligation. I thought about my grandmother again, about the way she used to say, quietly, "Pay attention to who benefits." I smiled. Because now, I was benefiting, not from inheritance, from clarity. And that's when I knew The story wasn't quite over yet. There was one last thing to do. The last thing I did wasn't dramatic. There was no courtroom, no raised voice, no public statement. No one applauded. That's how I knew it was right. I finalized the trust addendum on a Tuesday morning, sitting at my kitchen table with sunlight spilling across the wood. The document was simple, surgical. It didn't take anything away from my family. It made sure they could never take anything from me again. I declined any future role tied to Caldwell Property Group, not because I was afraid of it, because I was finished letting my identity orbit around something built before I could consent. The neutral fiduciary approved the structure. The court closed the file. The case became a reference number, then a precedent, then a footnote in someone else's argument. That's how justice usually ends. Quietly. Permanently. A week later, I visited my grandmother's garden alone. No family, no board members, no polite speeches. Just me and a stone bench with Evelyn Moore Caldwell's name carved into it. I sat there longer than I meant to. I told her everything. Out loud. Not because I believed she could hear me, but because I needed to say it without being interrupted. I told her I understood now why she never softened the truth to make people comfortable. I told her I stopped waiting for permission. I told her I chose myself. When I stood to leave, I felt something settle. Not closure. Something better. Finality. Life didn't become perfect after that. It became honest. I still spoke to my father occasionally. Brief conversations. Neutral ground. We talked about books, about the weather, about nothing that required repair. My mother kept her distance. I let her. Eliza and I exchanged a few emails over the months. Not about the past, about logistics, neutral updates, mutual respect without intimacy. That was enough. Nathaniel Brooks never reached out again. I heard through someone else that he'd moved to New York, remarried quickly, and told a version of the story where he was almost a victim. That, too, made sense. People who lose control rewrite history to survive. I didn't correct him. I didn't need to. The work I do now is quiet, advisory, prevention-focused. I help people recognize manipulation before it hardens into inheritance disputes, before silence becomes currency, before family turns into leverage. I never tell them my story unless they ask. Most don't. But sometimes a woman sits across from me, hands folded too tightly, voice careful in the way mine used to be, and asks a single question. How did you know when to stop trying? I always answer the same way. When the cost of staying became higher than the cost of leaving. That's the part people misunderstand about revenge. It isn't about punishing the people who hurt you. It's about removing their access to you. It's about refusing to keep paying for peace with your dignity. It's about deciding that being excluded from a toxic system is not a loss. It's a promotion. My family thought erasing me would make things easier. They were right, just not for them. I don't sit at their tables anymore. I don't soften my words. I don't explain my boundaries. I don't need to. I live a life where my name isn't leverage, my silence isn't assumed, and my worth isn't negotiated. And that is the kind of ending no one can take from you. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been sidelined, controlled, or quietly written out of a room you helped build, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Like the video if it helped you see something more clearly. Subscribe if you want more real stories about family drama, betrayal, revenge, and choosing yourself when no one else will. Sometimes the most powerful payback isn't loud. It's living well on your own terms.